How could a quiet university campus turn into a federal operation zone overnight? That's the question shaking Boston this month after reports surfaced that Immigration and Customs Enforcement ICE agents conducted a 4 a.m. raid at Boston University, an action dubbed Operation Ice Storm. Witnesses claim more than 1,000 international students were taken from dorms and escorted onto unmarked buses before sunrise. Official figures remain disputed, but the event has already ignited fierce debate over immigration enforcement civil rights and the future of higher education in the United States. According to multiple sources, including Reuters and The Guardian, ICE operations in Massachusetts have surged since June 2025, aligning with President Donald Trump's directive to intensify visa compliance checks and enforce deportation orders on individuals deemed non-cooperative or disruptive. The Department of Homeland Security described these actions as preventive measures against potential national threats. Yet at Boston University, questions emerged instantly: who decided that students, many with active F1 visas, should be treated like fugitives? Social media platforms exploded within hours. Hashtags like #HowDIStormBU and How to Students at Dawn trended worldwide. Some posts claimed that agents moved through student housing using sealed lists connected to SEVIS, the federal database tracking foreign students. A Reuters correspondent confirmed that at least 278 students from China, India, and the Middle East had their visa status abruptly revoked during the operation window. But was this enforcement or political theater meant to send a national message? Boston University, one of America's leading research institutions, has long hosted more than 10,000 international students who contribute millions in tuition and research output each semester. The university's administration released a short statement describing unprecedented enforcement action and expressing concern over the lack of transparency and communication from federal agencies. According to academic observers, the event disrupted ongoing research projects tied to defense technology, AI development, and biomedical studies, fields closely monitored by U.S. national security officials since 2024. At the center of the controversy stands the newly appointed border czar Tom Homan, who once vowed to bring order to sanctuary cities like Boston. His leadership under the Trump administration has revitalized ICE's operational structure, with more funding directed toward university compliance raids and data-driven targeting of visa violations. The Boston raid, insiders say, was part of a broader effort named Operation Patriot Shield, stretching from New York to California. For the students, the human cost was immediate. Local affiliates like WBUR reported panic across multiple campuses. Families overseas frantically called consulates for information that wasn't available. They disappeared overnight, said one BU faculty member, noting that dorm rooms were left unlocked and personal belongings untouched. Legal analysts point out that while the government maintains the right to revoke visas, mass detentions without prior notice may infringe constitutional protections of due process. Defense News drew an unexpected parallel. While the U.S. tightens control on student visas, border agencies are simultaneously battling escalating drug flows from Mexico and cartel networks across southern states. Analysts argue that the administration's domestic crackdown reflects a larger zero-tolerance doctrine spanning both immigration and internal security. Boston was not random, said Dr. Elise Morgan, a political scientist from Georgetown University. It's symbolic, a message to universities nationwide that compliance with federal oversight is no longer optional. Economic analysts warned the damage may extend beyond politics. In 2024 alone, international students injected over $38 billion into the U.S. economy. If fear drives them elsewhere to Canada, Australia, or Germany, the long-term academic and financial consequences could be severe. Meanwhile, data from the Department of Homeland Security reveals that student visa audits increased by 42% during the first 8 months of 2025, suggesting Boston may be the first of many such flashpoints. Could this operation mark a turning point in America's image as a global education hub, or is it the first sign of an era where universities become enforcement battlegrounds for national policy? Was Operation Ice Storm simply a one-off enforcement mission, or the first wave in a new era of American immigration doctrine? The Boston University raid didn't emerge from a vacuum. It reflected the culmination of President Donald Trump's intensified immigration enforcement strategy, which by mid-2025 had become a defining pillar of his second term. According to official statements from the Department of Homeland Security and data verified by Reuters, over 18,000 visa-related detentions occurred nationwide between January and September 2025, an unprecedented figure in U.S. higher education history. The administration's message is unmistakable: national security extends into the classroom. Trump's executive order in April 2025 directed ICE and Customs and Border Protection to eliminate visa abuse within federally funded academic institutions. Officials justified the policy by citing concerns about espionage, cyber infiltration, and extremist recruitment among foreign-funded student networks. While the language was broad, its consequences were swift. Within months, ICE rolled out Operation Patriot Shield, a federal plan merging counterintelligence data with SEVIS records to identify foreign nationals considered potentially subversive. Boston's case became its most visible example. Government insiders told the Washington Post that the raid followed months of surveillance triggered by protests involving international students. These demonstrations, some linked to pro-Palestine movements, were flagged by federal monitors as politically motivated gatherings. The Department of Justice has since defended the operation, insisting it targeted individuals who violated visa terms, not political expression. Yet, as The Guardian noted, the overlap between activism and immigration enforcement blurred dangerously close to constitutional red lines. Trump's supporters call it decisive leadership. Conservative analysts on Fox News praised the raid as a sign the government was reclaiming sovereignty over U.S. institutions infiltrated by foreign agendas. Meanwhile, immigration advocates warned of a chilling precedent. When education becomes a battlefield for national security, the line between protection and persecution dissolves, argued Professor Dana Farrell from Harvard's Kennedy School. Her warning echoed through think tanks across Washington, where policy experts debated whether universities should act as extensions of federal intelligence. At the same time, the administration's political calculus is clear. As border crises intensified with fentanyl seizures topping 40,000 pounds by August and cartel violence spilling into Texas and Arizona, the White House sought to prove control across all fronts from the Rio Grande to Boston Harbor. By connecting immigration enforcement to homeland defense, the Trump government effectively reframed academic visa violations as national security threats. This narrative, supported by data from DHS briefings, helped consolidate public backing for stricter oversight. Polls conducted by Gallup in September show 57% of Americans now support tighter visa screenings for foreign students, a 15-point jump from last year. Defense analysts point to another layer technology transfer. In 2024, multiple universities faced FBI probes for unauthorized research collaborations with Chinese tech entities linked to military development. Boston University's own nanotech lab, partially funded by international partners, reportedly came under federal review months before Ice Storm. Such scrutiny fits a pattern described by Jane's Defense Weekly, where advanced research hubs are increasingly viewed as strategic vulnerabilities in global competition, particularly against China and Iran. Still, the humanitarian impact is undeniable. The Guardian documented cases of students deported mid-semester leaving unfinished dissertations and unpaid housing contracts. Civil rights attorneys argue that ICE's mass enforcement lacks transparency. The constitutional right to due process doesn't vanish with a visa revocation, said legal scholar Richard Nguyen. He compared the situation to Cold War-era loyalty purges, only this time the targets are young scholars instead of government workers. As the administration doubles down on its doctrine of protective enforcement, universities nationwide brace for potential raids. Harvard, MIT, and Northeastern have already conducted internal reviews to preempt similar federal interventions. Analysts warn that unless coordination improves between educational institutions and DHS, tensions could escalate into a full-scale legal standoff. Is America securing its borders or eroding the very freedoms that once defined its global leadership? The answer may determine not only immigration policy, but the nation's moral identity in the years ahead. Can the United States defend its laws without violating the very principles it stands for? That question now drives the national debate surrounding Operation Ice Storm. At the center lies a legal gray zone where immigration enforcement collides with constitutional rights. Reports emerging from Boston, Cambridge, and Somerville paint a troubling picture: students detained without warrants, deported within hours, and denied access to counsel. Civil liberties organizations such as the ACLU and Amnesty International have called it a mass due process failure under the guise of national security. According to the New York Times, more than 420 international students across Massachusetts universities filed emergency legal appeals following the August 2025 raids. Federal judges in Boston and Springfield granted temporary restraining orders in at least 8 cases, forcing ICE to halt deportations until visa records could be verified. Yet for hundreds already placed on outbound flights, the damage was irreversible. Many of those removed were pursuing STEM degrees or research projects funded through U.S. federal grants programs that now sit frozen amid political controversy. White House officials defending the legality of the operation argue that revoked status nullifies visa protections. However, immigration attorneys counter that revocation must follow formal notice and an opportunity to contest allegations. It's the foundation of administrative justice, said constitutional lawyer Karen Linton, referencing Section 242 of the Immigration and Nationality Act. What happened in Boston skipped every safeguard we built after 9/11 to prevent abuse of power. Her statement echoes across academic circles, where faculty warn that fear is replacing trust as the dominant campus climate. Advocacy networks like the Loose Immigrant Justice Coalition report a surge in distress calls more than 300 in a single week following the raid. These range from missing roommates to confiscated passports. Harvard's own immigration clinic confirmed at least 60 requests for emergency representation from students caught in related ICE sweeps. Yet as DW News observed, most never made it to court before removal orders were executed. The pace and secrecy of these detentions suggest a deliberate strategy of speed avoiding prolonged litigation and media exposure. Politically, the Trump administration has doubled down, framing the controversy as a law and order test. Acting ICE Director Todd Lyons told NBC Boston that his agents were fulfilling the president's mandate to restore compliance and remove violators. Supporters hail the effort as a long overdue cleanup of a broken system that allows thousands of overstayed or fraudulent visas each year. Critics, meanwhile, view it as an authoritarian drift, evidence that the government is willing to sacrifice transparency for control. Internationally, reactions have been sharp. India's foreign ministry lodged a formal protest calling the deportations unprecedented and unacceptable. Chinese state media accused Washington of weaponizing education. The European Union's external affairs spokesperson urged clarity and restraint. Even Canada's immigration minister warned that the incident could redirect global student flows northward, an early sign of the collateral economic impact. In a world where higher education represents both soft power and commerce, such losses cut deeper than numbers. Experts estimate that American universities stand to lose up to $4.8 billion in tuition and research funding over the next academic cycle if foreign enrollment drops by just 10%. The Boston raid, according to Reuters Economics, has already triggered a 17% fall in new international applications for fall 2026. Fear travels faster than facts, commented Dr. Samuel Reed, a policy analyst at Brookings. And in politics, perception often becomes policy. As the legal dust settles, the central issue remains unresolved: how to balance national security with due process in an age of mass data and real-time enforcement. The courts may yet redefine those boundaries, but until they do, students, universities, and entire communities exist in a state of uncertainty. Could the next knock on a dorm room door become America's newest constitutional test? What happens when the pursuit of security invades the sanctuaries of education? In Boston, the shockwaves from Operation Ice Storm continue to ripple far beyond the city's academic heart. The raid not only removed hundreds of students, it dismantled a sense of safety that once defined the American university experience. At campuses like MIT, Northeastern, and Tufts, student groups describe sleepless nights, hushed meetings, and fears of sudden detention. Every time there's a knock on the door, heart stops, said a graduate researcher quoted by BBC News. The chaos began within hours of the 4 a.m. raid. Local media reported empty lecture halls, abandoned laptops, and faculty scrambling to confirm missing names from attendance lists. Boston University's administration issued a statement expressing deep concern for the well-being of all affected students, yet remained cautious not to challenge federal authority directly. This balancing act between protecting students and complying with Washington has become a tightrope for universities nationwide. According to The Guardian, over 30 Massachusetts institutions have since received ICE compliance notices demanding updated SEVIS data and records of student participation in politically sensitive activities. While officials insist these checks are routine, professors see them as surveillance disguised as procedure. The line between immigration enforcement and academic freedom is dissolving, warned Dr. Linda Vargas, a sociologist specializing in transnational policy. Her sentiment reflects a growing unease when classrooms feel like checkpoints. The mission foundation of education itself begins to erode. Meanwhile, the human toll deepens. Counseling centers report a spike in trauma cases with international students describing symptoms of anxiety and paranoia. Community organizations have stepped in to provide shelter and legal advice for those fearing follow-up raids. Families overseas, especially in India and China, flood university hotlines seeking confirmation their children are safe. We used to worry about grades, one parent told Reuters. Now we worry if our sons will be home tomorrow. Economically, the impact is equally severe. Massachusetts depends heavily on tuition from foreign students, estimated at $3.2 billion annually. A downturn in enrollment would hit not only universities but local businesses from housing to tech startups. Analysts warn that ripple effects could undermine Boston's reputation as an innovation hub. This isn't just an immigration issue, it's an economic self-sabotage, noted economist Robert Healy from Boston College. If the message is that the US's unpredictable competitors like Canada and Australia stand ready to benefit. Inside classrooms, the atmosphere has shifted. Professors avoid politically charged topics. Student associations have canceled international cultural events for fear they may attract scrutiny. We are living in silence, said a Middle Eastern student quoted by Al Jazeera. Even US-born peers expressed discomfort seeing the raids as a breach of what universities should represent: openness, inquiry, and safety. The result is a pervasive sense of mistrust, students watching their own words, faculty wary of visitors, administrators caught between ideals and orders. Boston's mayor, Michelle Wu, condemned the raids, labeling them un-American acts of intimidation. Yet her hands remain tied under federal supremacy. The Department of Homeland Security reaffirmed that local policies cannot obstruct federal immigration enforcement, highlighting a deeper national divide. Conservative lawmakers back in Washington, meanwhile, celebrated the operation as a model for nationwide implementation. For many, the question now isn't about legality, it's about the soul of America's education system. Can universities remain global beacons of knowledge when fear governs their hallways? Defense News drew a stark comparison as America tightens its borders. Rivals like China invest heavily in international recruitment, offering scholarships to displaced students. If these trends persist, the US could lose its academic dominance within a decade, a quiet casualty of domestic politics. Will fear replace freedom as the new currency of American education? When federal agents raid a university, who truly governs the city? The mayor or the president? Operation Ice Storm has reignited a national power struggle between Washington and America's sanctuary cities, with Boston standing at the epicenter. Mayor Michelle Wu, one of the most vocal critics of the Trump administration's immigration policies, condemned the raid as a covert assault on civic sovereignty. Yet the Department of Homeland Security quickly reminded her that immigration enforcement falls under federal jurisdiction, not municipal discretion. The confrontation exposed a long simmering tension, local leaders promising protection versus federal agencies executing presidential mandates. According to Reuters and NBC, Boston internal IC directives show that Boston was chosen not only for its student population, but also as a symbolic warning to non-cooperative jurisdictions. The order reportedly came from border czar Tom Homan, whose statements echo the president's tough rhetoric. Sanctuary cities will not shield violators of US law. In effect, the operation became both a law enforcement action and a political spectacle, a message broadcast nationwide that even academic strongholds are not immune from federal reach. The raid's aftermath splintered Massachusetts politics. Republican lawmakers praised the administration's resolve, arguing that visa integrity is a matter of national defense. Democrats, meanwhile, denounced what The Guardian called an authoritarian overreach, masquerading as security policy. Senator Elizabeth Warren demanded a congressional inquiry into ICE's use of university data, warning of unchecked surveillance in academic spaces. Her calls have since gained traction as legal scholars question whether SEVIS, originally created to ensure visa transparency, has morphed into a tool for mass profiling. Within Boston, street demonstrations erupted near the Charles River and Government Center. Thousands marched under banners reading "Education, not deportation" and "Hands off our classmates." Police managed to contain protests without major violence, but tensions simmered between local officers and federal task forces. The Boston Globe reported that some city police units privately shared frustration at being sidelined during the operation. "We were informed after the buses were already gone," said one officer, suggesting deliberate federal secrecy to avoid interference. As outrage grew, the Trump administration doubled down on its messaging. In a White House briefing, Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany defended Ice Storm as a lawful and necessary action to protect the integrity of American institutions. She accused critics of politicizing border security and praised ICE agents for upholding the president's vision of order. Conservative media quickly amplified this framing, portraying the operation as a triumph of discipline over chaos, a government taking back control from lawless liberal enclaves. But the backlash extends far beyond domestic politics. The BBC and DW News note that several European governments have begun reassessing academic exchange programs with the US, citing uncertainty for foreign scholars. The British Council reported a 22% drop in UK applicants to US graduate schools since August, a decline not seen since the early pandemic years. Every deported student becomes an ambassador, a fear observed political analyst Mark O'Donnell on Al Jazeera. They return home telling stories not of opportunity, but of expulsion. In Washington, lawmakers on both sides now recognize the political stakes. For Trump's base, the raid reinforces his image as the president who restored control to the border and the bureaucracy. For critics, it symbolizes creeping federal authoritarianism. The polarization mirrors America's broader divisions over immigration, education, and even identity. The White House's next move could determine whether Ice Storm becomes a singular controversy or a recurring policy instrument. As the dust settles over Boston, the question lingers, will local leaders resist further federal incursions? Or is this the new normal where the Oval Office dictates what happens in every city square and every university hall? Could one midnight raid reshape America's global reputation? As the shock of Operation Ice Storm spreads, the consequences reach far beyond Boston's brick facades and ivy-lined courtyards. Internationally, allies and adversaries alike are drawing their own conclusions about the new face of U.S. policy under President Donald Trump. What was once branded as the land of opportunity now faces accusations of hypocrisy from nations that see deported scholars as collateral in a domestic power struggle. According to Reuters' Global Education Monitor, by October 2025, U.S. embassies worldwide recorded a 34% decline in new student visa applications, while Canada and Germany reported sharp increases in their own. Analysts at The Guardian warned that the Boston raid may represent a turning point the moment America's moral leadership in education began to fracture. Soft power is not built on fear, said Dr. Adrian Weiss of the London School of Economics. When the US treats its own foreign students like security threats, it hands Beijing and Berlin the opportunity to lead. Defense and geopolitical analysts agree. Jane's Defense Weekly connects the crackdown to a broader Trump strategy aimed at reducing foreign influence across all strategic sectors, including academia, technology, and energy. At the same time, America's tightening posture reflects rising domestic fears of infiltration, Chinese cyber espionage, Iranian influence networks, and cartel-backed smuggling rings. The Ice Storm raid, in this view, becomes part of a larger defensive realignment, a signal that national sovereignty outweighs diplomatic sentiment. Yeah, but the damage to trust is measurable. In September 2025 alone, U.S. universities lost an estimated $1.2 billion in international tuition revenue. Research partnerships with Asian and European institutions have been paused pending security vetting. Meanwhile, global media coverage has cast Boston not as a city of learning, but as a cautionary tale. The raid turned every dormitory into a checkpoint, observed DW News, and every visa holder into a suspect. Inside Washington, debate intensifies. The Department of State warns that aggressive immigration enforcement may undercut long-term strategic influence. The Pentagon, however, supports the president's hardline approach, citing national security concerns about technology leaks and foreign intelligence operations masquerading as research. Trump's cabinet appears divided between those who see education as diplomacy and those who view it as vulnerability. Public opinion reflects this split. A Gallup poll released in late September shows 49% of Americans believe ICE acted within its rights, while 44% fear the government went too far. Among college-age voters, the disapproval rate exceeds 70%. Political strategists say the administration is betting that its base worried about border control and national integrity will outweigh the backlash from academia and urban centers. The international fallout grows daily. India and China are offering repatriation scholarships to deported students, transforming a U.S. enforcement scandal into a geopolitical recruitment opportunity. Meanwhile, the European Union has announced a joint fund to attract displaced researchers, labeling it academic solidarity. Even allies like Japan and South Korea have quietly sought assurances that their exchange students will not face similar treatment. The world is watching, warned former U.S. diplomat Richard Haas on BBC World News, and perception can harden into policy faster than we realize. At its core, Operation Ice Storm is not only a question of law, it's a test of America's global identity. Can a nation preserve its sovereignty while remaining a beacon of freedom and knowledge, or will fear-driven enforcement erode the very ideals that built its influence? The answers may define U.S. diplomacy, education, and politics for the decade ahead. The raid at Boston University may have ended before dawn, but its shadow still stretches across continents. From classrooms in Beijing to think tanks in Berlin, one question now echoes louder than ever. Is America still the destination for dreamers, or just another fortress guarding its gates? The August 2025 Operation Ice Storm at Boston University marked one of the most controversial immigration enforcement actions in modern U.S. history. Conducted under President Donald Trump's intensified national security agenda, the 4 a.m. raid allegedly led to the detention and deportation of hundreds, possibly over 1,000 international students, many without due process. The operation revealed deep fractures between local and federal authorities, igniting protests, lawsuits, and diplomatic backlash. While officials defended the move as necessary for sovereignty and visa integrity, critics warned of a constitutional crisis and economic self-harm. American universities reliant on billions in foreign tuition and research funding now face declining enrollment and reputational damage. Globally, allies question Washington's moral authority, while competitors exploit the opening to attract displaced talent. Experts warn that Ice Storm symbolizes more than a policy shift. It's a redefinition of America's global image. The nation that once championed open exchange now stands accused of weaponizing education. Whether history judges this as strength or folly will depend on one unresolved question: can the United States secure its borders without closing its mind to the world?